if we can, in our lives, follow nature's breath motion and live our lives in a way that harmonizes our activity with the activity of nature, breathing, then we have what we call longevity.
Welcome to the Modern Sage Podcast. I'm Leah Guy, your host, and as always, I'm super happy that you're here. This is a place that you can come to be informed and inspired about how to live a life that you love. And for those who've been listening, you know I have some amazing guests on the show, and today is no exception. I'm very excited. If you watch on YouTube, you will see us live in person in one location. It's the first time since COVID to have in-person guests, and he will delight and surprise us all with his information today. Before I introduce him, let me just remind you that if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a rating, a review, share it with your friends. It helps so much with the algorithm and just to get the word out. Also, follow me on social media at Leah Guy Live on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all the places. And you can watch these podcasts on YouTube, which is youtube.com/Leah Guy. So check us out there. And for more information about books, retreats, one-on-one work of my own, my website is leahguy.com. And as always, our guests' information, including Matthew's, will be in our show notes and on the screen so you can capture it there. All right, now today we are talking about all things wellness, and we're talking about death, dying and living. It's a very heavy topic, but to get us there, I think you will be intrigued with what this conversation reveals for you and maybe remind you. I want to introduce Matthew Branham. He is an acupuncturist, an herbalist, and he also teaches Tai Chi, Qigong, and meditation. He is local in my area, and he is my acupuncturist and herbalist. And in just a moment after he says hello, I want to tell you and remind you about the power of this medicine. But before that, let me just say welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
really
I'm so
pleasure
glad
to be
you're
here.
Oh, thank you. So for those who are in my personal circuit or follow me, you know this past year I've struggled with different things like shingles for one. And I know that a lot of people who've taken the vaccine have struggled with shingles. And so that was the primary reason that I went to find Matthew. I've had acupuncture in the past in Jersey City, in California, in Kentucky, a lot of places. Always enjoyed it, liked it, and yet it wasn't my kind of mainstay, I would say. I was so desperate this time with the shingles and all the things going on. Had a recommendation, found Matthew, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your butt here, Matthew, but I do want to say, since the first session I had with him and starting the herbs that he put me on, not only have I not had any shingles, but my allergies have not surfaced this fall. There's been no hay fever, which means there's been no vertigo, which is amazing. I get vertigo with allergy season stuff. What else? My whole system, as far as diet and just a general sense of well-being, has improved. And small things, well, they're not small, but like last week I shared with Matthew, I started to get a sty, I started to get a fever blister, the stress was starting to build again, and the consistent practice of acupuncture and the herbs that he has me on and the day-to-day, my day-to-day routine, it's eradicated it. And it's just amazing. So thank you.
Yay, no problem.
Yeah, Matthew, he's the best. So if you're in this area, I'll hook you up with him. So Matthew and I, usually I'm laying down, we're talking, and
Right.
we just talk.
We just talk. So that's sort of the bonus. One of the bonuses of receiving acupuncture is the needles are there and your body does the work. So you can just relax.
Yeah.
And talk.
Yeah, we talk. You can sleep, you can rest, you can listen to music. It's just a really, and maybe we'll have you back someday to talk about acupuncture in general. But today, we had a conversation that started a few weeks ago about living and about dying and about what you called, I'll let you say it.
There's something that what we were talking about had to do with life, living and dying from a seasonal perspective, from the perspective of following the seasons. And in Chinese medicine, that's really the fundamental understanding of Chinese medicine, is learning how to harmonize the body with nature's rhythm.
Yeah.
And that comes and is expressed as the seasons. So we were talking about the seasons, we were talking about all kinds of things, and then we started talking about life and death. And then it became clear that some of the issues that we have as people in a Western culture, modern culture, is that we're terrified of dying.
Yes. And before we continue, I just want to reflect for a moment of how interesting it is that both of us are in the wellness, if you will, the health and wellness field, supporting people to feel better. I think that often gets confused with trying to elongate people's lives, so it's an interesting conversation coming from two healers that are, let's talk about what it is to die and try to remove what we called, or you called, death phobia. And there is a death phobia. But so to get us there, I think it's really interesting, the concept of the seasons and how we can use that and relate that to our personal lives, both with our mood, our energy, our food, our nature. And why don't you talk to us a little bit about the seasons of, well, right now we're in the fall season, but somebody may be listening to this in the summer. So go through all of it, or how you shared with me about, and how to support a person through the seasons of life.
Yes. So again, I'm going to put all of this in the context of Chinese medicine. And the context of Chinese medicine, of course, lives in the context of Chinese culture. Foundational to understanding Chinese medicine and understanding Chinese culture in a way has to do with understanding what we call yin and yang. So I'm sure everybody out there has heard of yin and yang. You've heard of, you're familiar with the Tai Chi diagram. It's a bumper sticker, it's a cool shirt,
right?
Those kinds of things. But if we take it out of that two-dimensional flat, trope, and really start looking at what it is, yin and yang are patterns of motion. So yang is the expansive pattern of motion. Yin is the contracting pattern of motion. So yin and yang is breath, is following a breath dynamic. So everything in the universe is doing this, is breathing, is operating by the laws of yin and yang. Or as they say in the classics, in the Neijing, Huangdi Neijing, they call it the bianhua, or transformations of yin and yang. So this breath dynamic, this breath motion, this changing transformation from expanding and opening and closing and contracting is everything in life, including the seasons. So we were talking about this in the springtime. Everything is just starting to emerge. So this is the ascendancy of yang qi. On the planet, it's the springtime. So everything is rising. The insects wake up under the ground. The grass shoots start to come up. The sap starts to move up the trees start to bud. Everything is rising. So this is this seasonal inhalation, the beginning of everything expanding. New life, growth, expansion. So once we get into the summertime, the yang qi, everything is on the surface. Everything is, the flowers are out and blooming. The sun is shining. It's warm. Everything's at the surface. Yang qi's at the surface. So now we've reached the peak inhalation
and it's
of
hot,
the season. It's
right?
hot. It's warm.
So yang would be
expansion, warmth, heat.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're in the summertime now. All the flowers are blooming. It's beautiful. We're wearing our t-shirts because it's warm and hot out. It's very nice. there's just this fullness of the season, which we call summer. So that's everything at the surface. That's the peak inhalation. And you notice that in your own body. When we get to the peak of our inhalation, we're in summertime. When the breath turns over and starts to fall or descend, or that contraction, exhalation begins, now we're in fall or autumn. So that's where we are now, right now. And we notice that when we look outside, the trees are changing color, the sap is being pulled down towards the roots. Because of that, then the leaves start to fall. Everything is starting to contract. So that's what we call the beginning of yin. So when we get down to late fall, early winter, everything is now, winter actually starts in the Chinese calendar in November. And it's the winter equinox, December 21st the winter solstice is really the halfway point.
Oh.
So by then, everything has gone dormant. We've reached the terminus of exhalation, of our seasonal breath motion, and in our bodies as well. So everything in the wintertime is going dormant. So if we can, in our lives, follow nature's breath motion and live our lives in a way that harmonizes our activity with the activity of nature, breathing, then we have what we call longevity. And this is not supported in our culture. It's not promoted in our culture to harmonize ourselves with nature's cycle.
Yeah, it's not. And even just talking about food, which he and I have been talking about a lot because I'm trying to get some things straightened out inside. Back a long time ago, people ate what was available. And what was available was what you found or hunted and what was falling from the trees, right? And wherever you were, that's what you ate. And that's what your body needed. And now we've gotten this in the disharmony, the idea is this idea of I want what I want versus what wants to be given to me. And so I'm going to pay for the trucks and the airplanes and the hoo-haws in the different countries to bring me what I want, right? With all the stuff around it to keep it preserved long enough to get to me, and then take it. And what does our body do with that? In the middle of, for example, a yin period, which we're entering into, this yin period where it's dormant, what does the body do with foods that come from a yang season? What happens there?
Right. So, if things are, if we're in the wintertime and we're eating strawberries all the time, then we're going to experience some kind of disharmony in the body. It may not be, earth-shattering and you're sick all the time. It's just inappropriate.
Yeah, and your body has to do something with that, right? Which is extra energy.
Right.
That's using to break it down.
At a time of the season where expending extra energy is contrary to what the seasonal breath is doing. And so in the wintertime, when everything is going dormant, it's appropriate to follow that. Go to bed earlier. Sleep longer. Don't wake up until the sun comes up. These are ways where modern life doesn't support that. We've followed something else into punching in, punching out, time clocks.
Right.
Everything's happening at the speed of money.
Yeah.
Right. So all of these things are about not harmonizing with nature and using force, like you said, to make sure that we get what we want, which looks like success, looks like
The foods.
right,
Yeah.
whatever food I want to eat.
Well, to go back to that, I find it so fascinating because it's really so simple in a way, but we make it so hard because of how we've become brainwashed, quite frankly. And just that visual of eating strawberries in the winter. Well, now I know probably everyone, all of my listeners certainly have heard, eat your berries, get all your, your microgreens, do all the things that you're supposed to. And so people are trying to stuff in the quote right kinds of food to give them less aging, better sleep, better cognitive function, all these things. And we're just shoving this stuff in us and around us for longevity, which we're going to talk about death in just a minute. But, it's really interesting when you think about it that way of, well, if I relax here and harmonize, like you're saying, go within, that's the total opposite of pushing and force and trying to make something happen, right?
Right.
That's not what Yin's doing.
No, that's the opposite, right? So there, and this is something that if we now we're kind of looking at it from another perspective. We're looking at we've recognized that there's this breath dynamic that's happening that even is included in the day. In the very early morning as the sun's rising, that's springtime of the day. From noon till 3, the sun is at its peak. That's the summertime of the day. From 4 o'clock on, yang qi is waning, yin qi is growing, the sun's starting to get lower in the sky. The heat from the peak sun of the day is waning. As the sun sets, we're in autumn now. And now at night we're in wintertime, so there's a seasonality of the day. The human body is functioning that way as well. The energy when you wake up in the morning, you're not all there. You're just getting started. By the time lunchtime comes around, you're in your day. In the afternoon and heading towards the evening, everything's waning. Your energy is waning, your attention is waning, these different things are waning to where at night now you're settled, you're going to go to sleep. So we can see that happening in our day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, through the seasons.
Yeah.
So everything on a small level in the human body, in the daytime, in the season time, all of these things are following this expansion and contraction, open and closing. So
before we even move on from there, I just want to say, going back to food, because it's so elemental and fundamental to all of us, you can imagine the times that you're eating, you want to be eating when your yang, I say it wrong every time, yang, when your yang is highest.
Yes.
So that you have I think what they call agni or chi, the energy to break down the food.
Yeah, exactly. So excellent in that this is basically, if we just turn the American diet upside down, we would all be so much healthier, which means the most nutrient-dense, protein-rich meal should be breakfast, should be in the morning, when the digestive chi of the body is functioning at its peak between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. At that time, your body is ready to take on as much nutrient and protein-dense food as possible. It's ready, it's primed for that. That's where the chi is circulating. Lunchtime should be a smaller meal than breakfast and less nutrient dense. Dinner time should be the smallest meal of the day and the least protein dense, the least rich. But the American diet is exactly the opposite of that. We have nothing for breakfast. Sometimes we have a big lunch, and then dinner is huge. A real meat and potatoes kind of thing. Sometimes people eat as late as 8, 9 o'clock, eat dinner.
Sign me up. That's what I would do. That's especially living in the city. You just get into this pattern. I can tell you when I eat the way you're talking about, the correct way, automatically want to go to bed earlier. I
Yeah.
automatically wake up clearer, less puffy,
Yep.
less foggy in my head. And I'm hungry because
Yep.
it's like,
Exactly.
let me wake up, I'm going to eat, and I'm going to do my thing. I like to have a biggish breakfast, I guess, but then I not huge, and then I do a little bit bigger lunch, but not, it doesn't, whatever. I think we all
Yeah.
find our kind of way, but the
And that's
general,
fine. Yeah.
the general idea is don't wait until your yin is strongest and your chi is lowest to have your big meals that make you want to,
Right.
you know,
And that's it. And that the digestive chi of the body at, by 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, when a lot of people eat dinner at that time, is asleep.
yeah,
So now you're just piling food into a 98.6 degree
cooker.
cooker. And it's just sitting
So
there all
gross.
night long. And, then we start to develop, in Chinese medicine, we call food stagnation, which leads to qi stagnation, which can lead to blood stagnation. All of these things engender disharmony.
Yeah.
So we can flip that.
Yeah.
We can change that.
Yeah. And even with the particular foods, and I can hear already people listening thinking, well, what do I eat? Because there's not a lot of things grown in the winter. And I know you may have a different viewpoint. My viewpoint would be root vegetables, the lettuces and the animal proteins and the legumes and things that are naturally available right now, right?
Exactly.
And you don't need anything else besides that.
Exactly. I mean, those are the things, the root vegetables, the tubers, all of those things are, you think about them, they're dormant in the earth. They're spending their time under the ground in the winter season. So
they're available.
they're
right?
available. That's in that. When we get to winter, then we harvest those. When we get to the fall and late fall, we'll harvest those things that were in the earth, occupying the winter.
Yeah.
And that's what we eat in winter.
Yeah.
Lots of soups and stews and root vegetables and, this is what all of this implies is that we have to practice a little bit of restraint.
Yeah, see, I don't like that. Hold on. Let me get the Callie up here. Come here, Callie. So we had a whole other discussion. We could sit here and talk for hours, you guys, because we do in our sessions, and it goes for hours. But it's all great stuff about mind, the spirit, and the body, and the connection of all these things, right? And one of the conversations before we talked about restraint that I am resistant to sometimes. But we talk about the nourishment, and I just wanted to bring up, when we talk about things like comfort foods, especially when you're from where I'm from, that has a certain connotation, but also when we think about these stews and the soups and things that we think about in the wintertime and how hearty they are and how nourishing they are. And that's a word that Matthew uses a lot, I think, right?
Yeah.
About what nourishes you. And when you're thinking in that way of really giving your body and your mind and your emotional system, everything, what it needs versus the force against what it doesn't want, which is different than restraint.
Right.
So why don't you tell us now about restraint a little bit, because there's resistance, there is restraint, and there's another word. I'll think of it in just a moment.
Yeah. So when we talk about nourishing, so in Chinese medicine, in Taoist practice, we call it yang sheng, and yang sheng literally means nourishing life. So life, for all that we know, practically now, this is the only life we have. This is it. So maybe there is something else. I don't know. So I just stay here where I am living. So this is the life that we have. This is the life that we get to live. Okay, how do we do it? How do we live so that our bodies are healthy, our minds healthy, we're able, with our healthy body and healthy mind, to be useful to our community and to live a life.
I'll put in a satisfying life.
Yeah. Yes. So nourishing, that comes through nourishing, meaning that comes through looking at our life as something that can be nourished. And that comes through how we're doing what we're doing in our lives, how we're thinking about what we're thinking about, what we're saying to ourselves about what we're thinking about, what we're saying to other people. That's all a part of our life as we experience it. So if I don't nourish, then I'm going to do the opposite,
which is
injure.
Injure.
So, and if I'm injuring myself, we can all think about what that means for us. If I'm doing something that's injuring, that's coming into how I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing.
Right.
So is it I'm constantly beating up my body by overdoing it, over exercising, over working, over
Stimulation just in general.
Right.
Yeah. Overeating.
Over recreating, all these things.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm not nourishing. I'm injuring. If I'm thinking about nourishing, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking about, am I framing my thoughts around always getting what I want, or never getting what I don't want, or always complaining about what's occurring? Then I'm not nourishing. I'm injuring. So this practice of nourishing life means taking responsibility for what and how you're doing life.
Yeah. It's really huge. And so then to circle back, the restraint of certain things, we have a mindset that says if I don't get what I want, then I'm punishing myself, or life is bad to me, or I'm a victim, or I'm not worth it, or other people are bad, or whatever it is. But when we practice restraint for the purpose of nourishing, it's a different operating system than the kind of punishment that comes from restriction.
Right. So restriction might have been the other word that you were looking for.
I think it was, yeah.
So
I know.
that's that thing of restriction and restraint are not the same. They're different. Restriction is like you said, a punitive contingency that we set up against ourselves for the purpose of, looking a certain way, being a certain way, having someone think that I'm a certain way.
Right.
I'll introduce these restrictions on life, sleep, diet, sex, whatever it is.
Mostly coming from a place of insecurity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And keeping our emotional, what I call addictions, imprints, lower vibrational feelings in a certain comfort zone because they match that low feeling of security.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So restraint is something that is a conscious checking of our appetites. And
very well stated.
Our appetites are not just about food. They're about everything coming from through the senses. My appetite for visual stimulation, my appetite for audio stimulation, my appetite for touch, my appetite, all these things are appetites, and we feed them or starve them in ways. If we're injuring, then it's self-inflicted
Pain.
pain,
Mm-hmm.
punishment, punitive contingency. If it's nourishing, then we're not staying up till 2 a.m,
Right.
eating chips and watching TV.
Right.
We're practicing restraint by not doing that.
Yeah.
We could do it.
Right. And the not doing it isn't punishing ourselves. That inner child part of us may feel like it's being punished, but the conscious part of us that is practicing restraint for the purpose of self-nourishment it's a huge game changer when you can really adopt that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Even to the point where, we were talking before about addictions or things that we do that we're not super proud of or so forth. When we're participating, I don't even want to say proud of, but things we've been told not to do.
Right.
If you want to eat the half a box of cookies, okay, but are you going to beat yourself up while you eat the half a box of cookies?
Right.
Or can you just enjoy the half a box of cookies and go, you know what, I'm going to, recognize right now I don't have much restraint for XYZ
Right.
purposes, and therefore I'm going to have these cookies and not punish myself further.
Right.
Right? Is a little bit of a nourishing versus I know these cookies are bad. Everybody tells me I'm bad eating them. I feel too heavy and I'm hurting right now and I'm going to go hide and eat the cookies and I'm going to feel a lot of shame.
Yeah.
And now you're
Injuring.
And that effect that it has on not only just the physical body system and your health as you're experiencing in day to day, but the effect that it has on your emotional body and definitely on your mind.
Yeah.
And we just ride through it. We just kind of keep going.
Right. And that doesn't nourish.
Mm-hmm.
And changing that is possible. We can change that. It's not comfortable.
Right.
But that's the whole thing, is that and then, well, this ties right into our conversation about death and dying, and
Right.
and we've elevated comfort to a level that has completely disconnected us from nature.
The natural order of things, yes. I'm glad you went there because I was just about to say all this talk about how to nurture and how to nourish is a better word. When I think of nourish or nurture, I think of being kind and gentle to oneself and to others, but for the purposes of having a better or having a more whole experience while we're here doesn't mean that we apply this in the way to push against nature or age, which is natural, of course, or any of the elements to try to go beyond our time.
Right. Yeah.
Which
well
is
said.
The time that we will transform.
Right. I mean, this is the time that we have.
So let's talk about dying and death.
So when our time comes,
Yes.
we better be able to die instead of you hear a lot in hospital situations and even among family, and you're visiting people. Well, someone got a terminal diagnosis of something. Well, I'm going to fight. I'm a fighter. We identify with this in sort of an indignant way that we shouldn't die. And to the point where we punish ourselves for even having a thought of, I'm just going to die. I'm done.
Yeah.
I've suffered enough of this terminal illness or, whatever it is, that I'm now ready to die. And then, this contingent of the family swoops in and says, oh, no, you're not.
Right. It's a war. It becomes a complete conflict of everything inside of yourself. I'd like to share a personal experience that I had with a friend of mine's mother who had cancer, and visiting her frequently. It was the first time I think I witnessed someone in such pain and denial fighting death. The sounds that came out of her body with the screams of I'm not ready to die. Mostly, I think, due to relational issues and, things that felt incomplete and just constantly being in a life of conflict with oneself, you know, it was terrorizing for me, haunting to hear a person have that experience. And, you know, I can't sit here and go, oh yeah, I'm ready on one hand, because there's a human part of me. I don't want to be, you know, I want to live as long as possible,
Sure.
like everyone or most people. And there's another part of me is like, I can't wait to die, because I very much align with the spiritual side of life, and I feel very connected to those on the other side. But when I heard that, it became almost a mission of mine to not just seek peace, you know, seek peace with death. That's so easy to say. That's kind of like, you know, we'll pray for you. It's like we seek peace. But to really do the work inside of being like, I am alive right now, and it is also okay for me to not be in this form any longer.
Yeah, I'm dying.
I'm dying. We are all dying.
Yeah.
And I just want to have a little caveat here before we keep going, because for those who are enduring or suffering with a life-threatening illness, you know, and no means I don't think you nor I are saying don't try to live.
No, not
Yeah,
at all.
don't not fight it, or whatever the word is you want to use, and to consider, you know, the way of which what we're fighting for. You know, you and I's conversation also went way back in history, which I can't do. Maybe you can do it again, but about how
Sure.
historically, you know, the natural processes of living and birthing, living, and dying were quite different than
Yeah.
how they are now, you know?
Yeah, and I mean this story and a lot of these ideas come from different people that I've studied over the years. Martin Pertel and Stephen Jenkinson, Malidoma Somé, some of these people who have a whole lot of direct experience in number one, people making what it means to actually be a human being here, that our culture has forgotten and stopped really practicing. We can make babies and bring children into the world and raise them up and you know send them to college and do those kinds of things, but that's not the same thing as what our ancestors were doing in terms of taking people, bringing people out of adolescence and into adulthood, involved getting in touch with mortality and developing an understanding that death is here, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a part of our living. And if we can start to treat it as a part of our living, then maybe we won't be so terrified of it when that part of our life comes to fruition.
Right.
You know?
I think there's a big piece about, you know, the expectations that we set on what we should get while we're here.
Totally.
And that I haven't done it all yet. I haven't finished my bucket list. You know, I didn't get to have this experience or this much money or this much time with so and so or what have you. And we have an anger behind the grief of what we haven't yet experienced or didn't experience, that really fuels this egoic mind of ours that says, you know, you deserve more, or you know, there's this whole language that goes on with our expectations and what we deserve. And when we dial that back, when I look at death as a spiritual practice, like it is, I guess I want to say my experience with death, when I've been right in front of it, aside from that woman I shared, it's actually been the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. You know, it's,
Me too.
yeah, it's beautiful.
And birth and death.
Birth and death, they're beautiful. And And when we, use that spiritual practice or the spiritual element of dying in our living, well, one, it's the most poignant thing that can help us to be here right now, to be present,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because that's all that there is.
Yeah.
Is this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most people are living for the future or living for something that's not even here or real right now. And the terror, the fear of not being where they are in their mind somehow. It's like a whole really convoluted thing that happens, right?
It is. And, that's sort of inculcated by the modern culture, modern world, modern times, modern people. It's a very self-centered condition, and that in that self-centered condition, I'm always trying to get what I want and never get what I don't want, including death.
Yeah.
And I never want to get what I don't want. If that's my life, what's my death going to be like?
Right. I was going to say, you're already dying. You're already dead. If that's the way we're functioning, is I don't want to get what I don't want. And my whole drive is set up so that doesn't happen and I get what I want, then I'm already at least 60% dead, because we're not in the present moment to be with what is alive right here.
Exactly. Yeah.
You shared with me when we were talking about this, and the more I've thought about it, about how we used to process death, in the past, and historically, you can share again. But what I'm thinking about what you're about to say is that because we don't know how to grieve and we don't know how to be in deep connection with our peoples anymore, that in itself has fueled even more fear of separation, which I think is what people ultimately fear when they think about dying, is separation, right? So you were sharing about how people used to, like, what happened, why we can't grieve anymore.
Right. So, this comes from our history. And Martin Prechtel tells this story. In the year 589 in Spain, the Catholic Church made a law that banned the people in the village from doing grief, meaning being out in the street, wailing, tearing at their clothes, beating their chests, singing grief songs, carrying their dead through the town, maintaining the network of subtle connection to our immediate family, our extended family, the ones that have passed on, the ones that went all the way back. The Catholic Church in 589 made this decree that would be illegal. You're not allowed to do that, because the dead don't belong to you anymore. They belong to God. So, and they made some reference to something that Jesus said about don't weep for me. It was completely misinterpreted and taken out of context. But so from that point on, this was 589, we have forgotten or lost our constant, ever-present connection with what we can't see, which is our ancestors, the dead, however you want to say it. It's this doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So there was a huge religious, cultural institution that made this law and made this decree that organized culture along that thought line. So that's 589. Fast forward 1,000 years to 1589. Let's just call it 1600. That's when people started coming over here to America. So for 1,000 years, we had been in the practice of forgetting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an
what a shame.
amnesia about a very fundamental relationship with life and the dead and death in general that we've lost. And now, 1600 people start coming here trying to establish something, mostly fleeing away from whatever was there, the old ghosts that they'd forgotten for 1,000 years. And so we just start the same thing right up here.
Yeah.
And so, as Stephen Jenkinson says, the dominant culture of North America is terrified of dying. They have death phobia. And that has organized our culture in a particular way to where now we have palliative care and all of these kinds of things to extend dying,
Right.
instead of
The
natural order, which is contained within the family and the family system and the larger family, the larger village, the larger culture, that all of those that have passed are still here. They're not
Yeah.
they're not gone.
Wouldn't that be? And I know that several people, many people, not several, want to have like celebrations of life, and we do the congregating, and we have little micro glimpses of these gatherings and grief parties, if you will. But can you imagine what it would be like to be amongst your family, your friends, and so forth, generations, and to be able to openly share in the life of and in the transformation of, or the loss of, with all of your emotional integrity, with all of your fullest capacity of your heart, and share together one another, and walk the streets, as you said, and support each other, and be together, and process it, and integrate it into your family to continue that lineage. It sounds like heaven to me.
Yeah, it's just a totally
different
thing than what we're doing.
Yeah.
And two things. One is we want to change the language around it too, whereas it's not when someone dies, they die. We didn't lose them.
Right.
That's something that
we did. Yeah, exactly.
If we lost them because they died on us,
right,
then we did that.
Yeah.
They didn't do that.
Right.
They just died. So we have to change our thinking and change our language around it, so that it's not, you lose your keys, you lose your wallet, those kinds of things. When your dad dies, you didn't lose your dad. If you did, that means you forgot him.
Right. Right. Yes.
So all of these things, everything that we've been talking about today is taking responsibility for our lives and the things that we think, what we say, all of those things.
To observe how we're actually experiencing. So many people feel out of control and drowning in certain emotions and feel disempowered. And that's what I love about what you just shared. And I'm so glad you shared that, because I was struggling to say it or what to say about it, because in that same way, I actually feel closer to some of my deceased family than the ones that are here. I don't miss them at all, because I experience them almost every day, if not, every few days. I talk to them, I pray with them, I feel them, I have life with them. That's my belief, but it's also a knowing that just, I feel it in my soul. And I think that that's so important and powerful, what you're saying, because the idea this victim mentality, I guess, if I could be so strong to say that,
mm.
across the board,
Yeah.
Across the board in life is so, it drives the fear and the victim mentality. It drives so much of our purpose that we've attached ourselves to somehow, and to reflect back to us who we aren't, basically, who we aren't and what we don't have, and how to feel pain over and over and over again. And when we really stop in the now, and this is a practice, with my clients and so forth, or at retreats, I often, let's go ahead and bring up all the thoughts. Let's think about all the feelings. How'd you feel this week? What'd you say yesterday? Angry, I could tell you all about how terrible it was, or whatever. But let's just notice, just as the practice, and I know you're very well familiar with this, of what is right now. And most of the time, 99.99999% of the time, the right now is, oh, it's actually okay.
Yeah.
I'm not triggered. I'm not upset. I'm not crying. I'm not. And if you are, that's okay. We let that emotion go. But when we're not living like that, we're just checked out, right?
Yeah.
It's sad.
It's a
Yeah.
it's a very this way, it's like, that the kind of death phobia and the pace of modern life and the marketing that modern culture is presenting is really about always getting what you want.
Yeah.
Always getting what you want.
Right.
Always getting what you want. Always getting what you want.
Trying to avoid discomfort at any moment.
And so what is the outcome of that? Depression.
Yeah.
And so, like Martin Bertel says, he says, depression is easy. It's easy to be depressed, and that's what we trade off. That's our trade-off that we didn't really necessarily consent to participate in this modern world. We trade our ability to have everything that we want for the side effect of the depression that comes with
oh my God,
not having to owe anybody anything. I don't have to, I don't owe you anything. It's all about me, what I want. Better get what I want, never get what I don't want.
Yeah.
And at such a pace that it's just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, through the phone, through the computer, through the TV, through the car stereo.
God,
I mean, from all
Fill
sides,
me up.
at
Fill me
all.
up.
Yeah, we're just the appetites.
Yeah.
Constantly gorging, constant gorging through the senses.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And so now we come back to restraint. What if we can practice restraint? What does our life look like if we're not constantly gorging through our senses?
Yeah.
And eating life and got to get the most out of life.
Right.
Well,
haven't we gotten the most out of life?
Right.
We were born.
We're
for
here.
God's sake.
This
I
is
know.
it.
This is it. I want to bring this back kind of full circle with the yin and yang. And I know also coming to you and talking about hormones, and people who follow me, no stranger here. I'm at the age of approaching a different cycle in my life, and in the same way of the kind of, I don't want what I don't want, right? I don't want hot flashes. I don't want my boobs to sag. I don't want less sleep and to be sweating in the middle of a thing or whatever. I don't want that.
Right.
And so like a lot of women, we try to avoid those things with bioidentical hormones and hormone patches and all the things that we try. And I'm not judging or saying any of those are bad or wrong at all. Because I think there is something to support. I've had Matthew, throw in some needles to help my hormonal system out, to support where we are, and to allow also the natural cycle of life to happen, because it's going to. And I can either resist it and use my force to try to stop it, or allow it and trying to nourish myself through the process to make it a little more palatable for living, right? But thinking about the yin and yang of this is clearly I'm probably, I guess, let me guess, okay? I'm probably at fall season in my life, the beginning of yin, right? So we were born and the yang is starting, and then we come into our teens and early 20s, and the yang is probably at its height, right?
Yeah, up until the 30s,
In the 30s. And then we come to the 40s, and then certainly the 50s,
and it starts to.
and we start to contract physically, energetically, mentally, emotionally. It doesn't mean you have to wither.
No.
We are so, I guess, fortunate is the word, or so conditioned to think that, and now, 50 is the new 20, and, you can look this way instead of this way. It's not old anymore. It's whatever the mentality is that you're struggling with or working with, I get it. It's a real thing. Our society has a lot of pressure about it. But when we enter into that acceptance piece of, well, this is a new cycle, this is the yin, and my body is changing. Not only is my body changing, my mind is changing for the better, I think. But, my emotions are changing, my desires are changing. The fire that I had to go out and party all night, not there anymore, like everything changes. And then when the yin sits in fully, then we come to the time where we are coming closer to earth, right? And we're coming closer to the withering is such a bad word. Not a bad word, but it's such a, it's a very descriptive word. What else can we say here?
Well, it's sort of like this process of dormancy inside the dormant seed or tuber or root or whatever is the sprouting and fullness of the next thing.
Right.
So
we are feeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point is that there's nothing wrong.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong. It's just there's a natural cycle that's happening. In that natural cycle that's happening, there is loss and gain. And there's nothing wrong there.
Yeah.
There's loss and gain. And some things we lose and some things we gain. And as we age, the things that we lose in general are more dense, physical, actual things that we're losing. And the things that we gain are more spiritual or of a more subtle quality.
Yeah.
So if I always need it to be, well, I can't lose any of that, and this is what I want to gain, then I'm going to be disappointed for sure, and stressed.
Yeah.
So we have to love the season change. We have to love, just as much as we enjoy, the springtime and the trees starting to bud, and hearing the spring peepers and seeing the young life that's emerging in little rabbits and deer. And the fall, we love the fall because the air quality changes and the light changes and the leaves start to fall. That same joy that we get from observing nature doing its thing, that's happening here too. So if we can,
can we love the winter?
Can we love it?
Yeah.
Can we love the winter? Can we let what's occurring be without needing it to be different? Because whatever is occurring it's important. It's a part of a natural thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we're not going to be 20 anymore.
Well, that's the thing. If we can remove the judgment from ourselves, of what I'm not, and just be in the acceptance and that curiosity, the wonder of
exactly.
Look at what I am. Look what I am though. That really is something. And when our vitality is contracting, to honor that as best that we can.
Yeah.
And prepare.
So, and that's, I'm just going to flash back to dying and that way of preparing, because we can't be prepared,
Right.
like as a way to mitigate or avoid the consequence that is, which is death, you know. But what we can do if we, you know, prepare ourselves is, how do we do that, you know? We stop trying to not die,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is that, you know, there may be some listeners here that are going through this themselves. There may be some listeners that are, you know, dealing with close family that are dying. This, you know, it's not going to benefit the person who's dying per se right then, but it is going to benefit all the people around that person dying. If they can see and witness this dying person dying without resistance.
Right.
Because then the people around the person who's dying without resistance to dying
Gives them permission to die.
Exactly. And then we've got a whole surrounded, you know, extended family surrounding people that are there, that include maybe the siblings or the children and the grandchildren, seeing and witnessing a part of life that is sacred.
Yes.
You know?
And that is how we can change the conversation and the mentality around
Yeah.
how we move through these phases in our life.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, Matthew, I love having you here. As I said, we can talk all day. Can you tell? But I so appreciate your wisdom and also your support with my stuff going on, and just helping to remind each of us of these important, really, laws of nature, if you will, or just truths. And I hope that it's given you something to think about and to chew on and to return back to. And as I said, certainly share this episode with someone that you think needs to hear it. If you're interested in Matthew and his work, what's your website?
HealingPathAcupuncture.com.
HealingPathAcupuncture.com. Or, of course, you can contact me and I can give you that info. So thanks for listening. I hope you have a fantastic day. Feel your feelings, whatever they are. Check us out on social media. And don't forget, you can watch these on YouTube. All right. Take care, and we'll see you next week.